He wiped down the counter like he always did, quietly, quickly, and with a kind of focus that most people never noticed. To them, he was just the waiter, the one who brought menus, refilled water glasses, and smiled politely at jokes he'd heard 100 times. No one asked his name. No one cared about his story. But what they didn't know was that this just a waiter had a secret. Behind those calm eyes and that clean apron was a man with a plan, one that would turn his life, and theirs, upside down. For years, he listened, he observed. He watched owners make choices, good and bad. He learned from managers, chefs, even the dishwashers. Every shift was a lesson. Every mistake someone else made, he studied like a playbook. But still, no one saw him. No one imagined that the quiet guy serving their table was actually dreaming bigger than all of them combined. Then one day, something happened. Something small, but it changed everything. It wasn't a lottery ticket or a rich relative. It was a conversation, a moment. And suddenly, the gears started turning faster. He had an idea, a risk, a chance, and that's when things started to move. Fast, people who once ignored him now wanted to know his name. The same restaurant that overlooked him was now calling him boss. But how did he do it? How did a man with no business degree, no investors, and no support go from waiting tables to owning not just one, but an entire chain of restaurants? That's where the real story begins. Because the journey from the bottom to the top isn't always loud or flashy. Sometimes it starts in silence with a tray in hand. And a dream no one believed in. His name was Armand. He started working at the small diner when he was just 19. It wasn't his dream job, but it was a job. He needed to help his family, pay the bills, and stay afloat. Every morning, he tied his apron and stepped into a world where he was invisible to most. People ordered. He smiled. They ate. He cleaned. That was the routine. But while others saw it as a dead end, Armand saw something different. He paid attention. Every time a supplier came in, he listened. When the manager struggled with scheduling or costs, he took mental notes. He wasn't just serving tables, he was studying a business. The owner of the place, Mr. Roy, was kind but tired. Years in the industry had worn him down. He often spoke about selling the diner, about retiring. Most of the staff brushed it off, but Armand listened closely. The idea of owning something, of building something that was his, started to grow stronger in his mind. But how? He didn't have savings, no investors, no fancy education. Just grit, late nights, and a head full of quiet ambition. As months passed, he noticed the cracks in the business: poor marketing, outdated menus, low staff morale. And still, no one was doing anything about it. Armand began writing things down, ideas, solutions, even mock budgets. He didn't tell anyone, not yet, because who would take him seriously? To everyone else, he was still just the waiter. But one night, after closing, Armand overheard something that stopped him in his tracks. A private conversation between Mr. Roy and a man in a suit. Words like selling fast, undervalued, and takeover filled the room. Armand stood frozen. Was this the moment he'd been waiting for? Or the beginning of something much bigger and riskier than he ever imagined? Armand couldn't sleep that night. The conversation kept echoing in his mind. Dasterisk selling fast. Takeover, ... New management, ... Something about the man in the suit didn't sit right. He wasn't a local. That much was clear. Sharp suit, polished shoes, and the kind of fake smile that never reached the eyes. Armand had seen enough people pass through the diner to know when someone was hiding something. And if Mr. Roy was about to sell, it wasn't just the restaurants. Future on the line. It was the jobs of everyone who worked there. The cooks, the servers. Even old Reggie in the back, who washed dishes and hummed old songs every shift. Armand wanted to say something, but what could he do? He wasn't a partner. He didn't own shares. He didn't even have a real voice in the place. Still, something inside him said he couldn't just watch it all fall apart. So, he did what he always did. He paid attention. The next day, he watched Mr. Roy more closely. The man was distracted, signing papers, stepping out for long phone calls, barely speaking to the staff. The regulars noticed too. A few even whispered that something felt off. Change was coming, and not the good kind. At the same time, Armin was quietly working on something of his own. Late at night, he was drawing up a plan, a bold one. Not just to save the diner, but to prove to everyone that he was more than just a waiter. But it wasn't easy. He had no capital. Banks wouldn't take him seriously. His friends thought he was dreaming too big. Even his own family told him to be careful. And then, one afternoon, an unexpected visitor came looking for Armin. Not a customer. Not staff. Someone with a message and a warning that changed everything. The man who came looking for Armin didn't ask for a table. He walked straight up to him, suit crisp, tone sharp. "Are you Armin?" he asked, loud enough for nearby staff to pause mid-task. Armin nodded, unsure what was coming. The man handed him a card. "You don't know me, but you're standing in the way of something bigger than you understand. Walk away before it's too late." Armin's hands clenched the card, his heart pounding. The name printed on it matched the company he had seen. On Mr. Roy's desk days before Nexcore Group, a private equity firm known for flipping struggling businesses. They didn't save restaurants. They gutted them and sold the pieces. That night, Armin stayed at the diner after closing, alone. Under the flickering ceiling lights, he sat at the same table where so many others had eaten, laughed, and never noticed him. He opened his notebook and stared at his plan. He had one shot and it had to happen fast. Mr. Roy was slipping further away each day. Armin needed funding, fast. And alleys, he started reaching out to regulars, people who loved the diner for more than just food. Some of them had stories, first dates, anniversaries, birthdays, all in that same little booth by the window. Slowly, he found a few who believed in the place enough to help. Silent partners, small investors, old neighbors willing to chip in. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Then came the final straw. Armin discovered a document left on the back counter, an early draft of Nexcore's plans for the site. The words hit hard. Demolition, rebranding, job cuts. They weren't buying the restaurant to fix it. They were planning to erase it. Armin had to act. But time was running out. The next morning, Armin stood outside the diner before sunrise. Gripping a folder that held every piece of his planned financials, a proposal, letters of support from longtime customers, and a small but growing list of investors. He barely slept. His nerves were shot. But this was the moment he'd been working toward. Mr. Roy was scheduled to meet the Nexcore rep that afternoon to finalize the sale. If Armin was going to make a move, it had to be now. He waited until the morning rush died down before asking Mr. Roy for a few minutes. The older man looked tired, distracted. His usual warmth dimmed. Armin slid the folder across the table and said, quietly, "Before you sign anything, please read this." Mr. Roy looked surprised. Maybe even a little annoyed, but something in Armin's voice stopped him from brushing it off. He opened the folder, and the room fell silent. Every page turned slower than the last. Armin could barely breathe. Each second felt like an hour. Would he laugh? Would he say no? Would he even care? Then, just as Mr. Roy reached the final page, the front door swung open. The Nexcore rep had arrived, slick smile, briefcase in hand, ready to close the deal. He froze when he saw Armin sitting across from Roy. "We have a contract to finish," he said sharply, eyes locked on Armin. But Mr. Roy didn't speak. He looked from the folder to the man in the suit, then back to Armin. The tension in the air was thick. Staff had started to gather nearby, pretending to clean, but clearly listening. Everyone knew something big was about to happen. And then came the words that no one expected. But not from Mr. Roy, from someone else entirely, someone Arman hadn't even seen walk in. It was Mrs. Patel, the elderly woman who came in every morning at 7 a.m. sharp for her tea and toast. No one noticed her slip in, as usual, soft footsteps, quiet presence. But now she stood just behind Arman and said firmly, "Don't sell it to them, Roy. You know what this place means to us." Everyone turned. Tiva, the next core rep, looked confused. Mr. Roy blinked. "How do you—" "I've been coming here since your father ran the place," she said calmly. "And I've also been watching this young man. Arman isn't just a waiter. He's the future of this diner. If you let him be." That's when Arman realized Mrs. Patel wasn't just a customer. She was one of the original investors when the diner first opened decades ago. Her name was buried in old paperwork, long forgotten, but she still held a tiny share. And with that, she had a voice. Tension cracked like glass in the room. The next core rep stepped forward, trying to take control. "This is all very sweet, but Mr. Roy and I have an agreement, legally binding." But Roy didn't move. He was staring at the photo wall behind the counter. Old memories. Happy faces. Years of stories that couldn't be replaced by glass and steel. Slowly, he pushed the next core contract aside. "I'm not selling to you," he said. "Not if. It means erasing everything this place stands for." The room burst into whispers. The rep's face turned cold. "You'll regret this." Maybe, but Roy was already turning to Arman. "Let's talk. You've got a plan. I want to hear all of it." Relief washed over Arman, until he noticed the next core rep making a quiet call as he walked out. His words, "It's not over. Not yet." In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The diner was no longer just a workplace, became a project, a mission, a second chance. Arman sat down with Mr. Roy almost every night, going over numbers, suppliers, renovations, and ways to bring in more customers without losing what made the place special. Word spread fast. Locals rallied behind the decision. Some offered help painting, others brought in old photos to decorate the walls, sharing stories of first dates and family dinners. With Mrs. Patel's small investment reopened, and a few more regulars stepping in as silent partners, Arman secured just enough funding to start turning his ideas into action. He updated the menu, added online ordering, and trained the staff in new roles. But most importantly, he made sure no one felt overlooked. Everyone from the dishwashers to the cooks had a say. Next core didn't try again. They saw the community back in the place. Maybe they moved on to easier targets. Either way, they disappeared as fast as they came. But that final phone call from their rep stayed in Arman's mind, a quiet reminder that not every win is permanent. Still, he didn't let fear run the show. He let purpose lead instead. Months later, the diner was not only thriving, Ute had a waiting list on weekends. Arman no longer wore an apron, but he still helped bus tables when things got busy. People now called him the owner, but he never forgot where he started. And sometimes, when new customers walked in and saw him clearing a table, they'd ask, "Are you just a waiter?" He'd smile, just like he used to, and reply, "Not just. Never just." Then he'd glance around the room he helped Sivan build with nothing more than a dream, a plan, and the heart to try.